Welcome to YouTube channel Parliamentary Reporter. This is English shorthand dictation number 57 and the dictation speed is 160 words per minute. Ready? Start. Mr. Chairman, sir, I thank you for the opportunity to speak on the Institute of Teaching and Research in Ayurveda Bill 2020. This is a bill that is both welcome and disappointing. There is so much interest in our traditional healing system, and it should not come as a surprise to anyone because it comes at a time of unparalleled popularity and mainstream acceptance of Ayurvedic practice, both domestically as well as internationally, as the minister has said. From the perspective of market conditions, in 2015, the global market for Ayurvedic products, according to our own government figures, amounted to nearly $3.4 billion, a number that will nearly triple to $9.7 billion by the year 2022, growing at 16%. In a recent report, the forecasts predicted were astonishing. The sale of Ayurvedic products is expected to rise threefold to $8 billion by 2022 from $2.5 billion in 2015, and at this time an estimated 77% of Indian households are using Ayurvedic products. Similarly, the export of such products from India on an average is about $780 million a year and is expected to grow by 20% annually. Sir, which state has been the engine of such remarkable growth and expansion in the field of Ayurveda? It is Kerala. The state harbors nearly 1,400 industries associated with Ayurveda, which pull in a combined total of $37 million and exports of $8.6 million in addition to an overall 10% market share of the total Indian market for herbal-based products and treatment. Now, as you all know, the origins of Ayurveda can be traced back to the Vedas, starting from mentions in the Rig Veda and subsequently in the Atharva Veda. In terms of its remarkable approach to treatment, there is arguably no equivalent of Ayurveda in Western medicine. As many experts have pointed out, unlike European biomedicine, which visualized and conceptualized the body in the form of dissections, Ayurveda looked at the body as a series of systems where the balance of the key elements was the way to a healthy life and longevity. Sir, Ayurveda is also associated with Indian nationalism. During the colonial rule, the popularity of Ayurveda rose nationally. First, because of the fact that the British were indifferent to the health of Indians, leading to a poor public health infrastructure and the outbreak of several epidemics like the Bombay Plague. This meant that traditional medicine was the only option of ordinary Indians, and so Ayurveda came back into popularity. The second reason, of course, was because of the most politically charged revival of interest in our past that the nationalist movement evoked, and that led to a renewed interest in Ayurveda. Of course, in the post-independence era, under many Congress governments and others, Ayurveda has revived, and along with yoga and the larger concepts of India's wellness, we have begun a soaring popularity for Ayurveda, which is particularly relevant today when the world is paying more attention to human wellness rather than merely the treatment of symptoms. More and more people around the world are turning to Ayurveda as a preferred source of treatment. At the same time, in these conditions, there are factors that continue to pose challenges to our aim of realizing the full potential of Ayurveda. The first of these is research and documentation, which of course the bill seeks to address. The lack of credible documentation as a concern may come across as a paradox to many because Ayurveda has been gaining in popularity. But what is interesting is that in Western science, they say that you must have a clear diagnosis, a clear prescription, the prescription resulting in such and such results, you document it and you show your research. That is how the science is established. Ayurveda is much more instinctive, rather like the ragas, where the basic raga is laid down and each player plays his own tune, improvising from it. Similarly, in Ayurveda, each individual Ayurvedic practitioner will treat each patient differently. We we had a situation where British Committee on Science and Technology in 2010, headed by the then president of the World Federation of Neurosciences, declared in a special report that Ayurveda was a system without any scientific basis. In fact, this committee, in the value of complementary and alternative medicine theories, has ranked Ayurveda lower than even hypnosis or crystal therapy. It took official outrage from the UPA government at that time and presentations from a high-level delegation of Indian experts before that committee, before the latter was forced to see the benefits of Ayurvedic treatment. And we even had defense experts from the Siachen experience going and saying that the Ayurveda was the most effective treatment for high-altitude sickness. So these are the kinds of things we need to do to be able to document effectively. In the absence of credible documentation and case studies on the proven benefits of the treatment of Ayurveda in specific cases, all it will take is one article or one paper for the international community to dismiss Ayurveda as a voodoo science. Therefore, documentation must comply with international standards for reporting and evidence-based research, and that is very important when we decide what we are going to do in this bill and beyond on strengthening Ayurvedic treatment in our country. But serious documentation is only one side of the coin. The other important aspect that we do not adequately deliberate over is that legal security and safeguards are not provided adequately to Ayurveda and indeed to all forms of traditional knowledge in our country. We lack a comprehensive system to safeguard those who have over the generations protected and honed these resources, and this is putting us as disadvantaged in the globalized world. In fact, many of our indigenous communities rely on traditional knowledge for their livelihood and their identity. Its misappropriation can prejudice their interests and rights. For instance, Ayurveda caters to nearly 65% or 75% of our population in rural India, but nothing has been done to safeguard its practitioners and their store of knowledge. In an age when biopiracy is a very real threat, the safety of our traditional knowledge is not something on which we can differ, but it has been ignored in your bill, Mr. Minister. Contemporary scientific and technological advancements, when married to tradition, promise great economic potential. That is why other countries are trying to acquire exclusive privileges in the form of intellectual property rights over India's traditional knowledge by those with very vague connections to our knowledge. Seeing common Indian herbs patented in America gave us all a major wake-up call a few years ago. So the intellectual property regime seeks to protect researchers and innovators, but it may do the opposite by privileging those who come up with creative new ways of copyrighting traditional knowledge and exploiting the discoveries of the ancients. At its very core, the concept of intellectual property cannot be applied to traditional knowledge because no single person can claim as property something that is perennial, evolving, and in its very nature almost amorphous. As one of the world's oldest civilizations with a wealth of accumulated traditional resources, it is our responsibility to do what is necessary to maintain the integrity of our cultural inheritance. And if we do not take steps now, misappropriation by others may well lead us to belated collective regret. That is why, Mr. Minister, a few years back I introduced in Parliament a private member's bill for the protection of Indian traditional knowledge, which provided custodianship of all traditional knowledge to either the state or the central government, with such custodianship transferred to the practitioners who could show their practices as distinct and exclusive. They were also empowered to market their traditional knowledge as they deem appropriate, ensuring that any commercial value in it would benefit the traditional indigenous people of our country. By design, my bill was intended to protect us from foreign appropriation and would have provided an opportunity for Indians to learn more about culture and practices through a legally protected system. Non-custodians could work with the original communities and communities who preserved it. We have the Traditional Knowledge Digital Library, a database containing 34 million pages of formatted information on some 226,000 medicinal formulations in multiple Indian languages. This is a major step in in this direction. It has helped codify and classify our traditional knowledge so that others cannot grant flawed patents under their system. Unfortunately, my bill was not adopted by the government and it eventually lapsed. I hope that the minister will reconsider incorporating it in his holistic approach on Ayurveda. In the globalizing world, it seems that there is a controversy about Ayurveda. Many disruptive market forces have come in. There is a clash between the purists and the new age practitioners of Ayurveda. There is no argument about the increasing popularity of Ayurveda. Clinics claiming to offer Ayurvedic treatment are sprouting in places as far as London and the Italian Dolomites, and Ayurvedic tourism is already a significant money spinner for our national exchequer. We had a debate on tourism the other day, and Ayurveda remains a major feature of it. We in Kerala have been advertising our Ayurvedic spas. Many five-star hotels in Kerala have actually cashed in on the rage. Tourism brochures often show a winsome blonde being massaged by a lady in a traditional red bordered white Kerala sari with jasmine in her hair and a brass lamp at her side. This is effectively packaged exotica.